morning. It is Empowered Education Thursday, and I am so happy to see all of you getting educated and empowered. If this is your first Empowered Education presentation, then make sure after this to go into our videos where we have all of our past presentations recorded for your viewing pleasure. Also for you to share and send to your friends and family members who you think that it would benefit, because this information is something that would benefit every single person to know. That way we can create a better world and environment for those around us. Today, oh, I didn't even tell you what my name is. My name is Danielle, and I am the education specialist here at the Turning Point Rape Crisis Center. So if you found us, you are on our Facebook page, but make sure to give our page a like and share this video, do a watch party, and just spread awareness, because we want to use this series to touch and impact so many people. That way this problem won't exist anymore. So let's get started. Okay, so this is our presentation. It takes you, Nati. It's a bystander's guide on being empowered and educated, because once we're educated about the problem, we can be the change to fix it and support survivors along the way. So here at the Turning Point, we have a 24-hour crisis hotline. That number is 1-800-886-7273. You can call that number at any time, and we will be able to assist you with anything, any questions you have revolving around sexual violence, getting involved with counseling, and even scheduling the SANE exam. So that brings us into the first things that we offer. So counseling, we offer 100% free counseling for survivors and their friends and family members. We want to make sure that everybody is supported during this time, working through the trauma and being able to support survivors and friends and family during this trauma. So our counseling services, if you call that crisis hotline, then we can get you set up with counseling, or you can call our business line and we can also get you involved with counseling there. Advocacy is our next thing. So advocacy is where we go into the hospital and we support survivors during their SANE exam. So the SANE exam is a sexual assault nurse examination. So when we go into the hospital, we provide resources, we let them know their rights, and we're overall just there for the survivor and to help our amazing SANE nurses. And then lastly is this, education. We go into the community, in schools, and online platforms now with COVID to spread awareness and education about sexual violence, its roots and its causes. And we do different fun series that go into things that you never thought about in correlation with sexual violence. So let's get started with our mission. So our mission is to highlight the impact of sexual violence on individuals and our community through education programs that foster hope, encourage change, and prevent sexual violence. Join us in the fight against sexual violence. The Turning Point is committed to reducing the prevalence of sexual violence in our community. We firmly believe that for this change to occur, each person has a responsibility and must do their part to prevent sexual violence. So, why bullying? So we provide education aimed at the prevention of bullying, which is our topic for today. We're going to be talking about bullying and its lasting effects. So we provide education aimed at the prevention of bullying, sexual harassment, and sexual assault, because the root of these three social problems is a need for power and control. We know that students who bully are more likely to engage in harassing behaviors down the road, and that almost half of middle school students have experienced verbal sexual harassment. Our goal is to promote healthy, respectful behaviors that empower people to encourage equality in their school and community as early as possible. We promote social emotional learning concepts to help students develop empathy and learn healthy ways of expressing emotions to prevent violence. So, what is bullying? So bullying is a form of aggressive behavior that is intentional, hurtful, and repeated. So those three things are the things that we need for it to be bullying. So it's aggressive behavior that is intentional, hurtful, and repeated. My voice sounds silly. I'm going to take a drink of water. Okay. So there are 3 types of bullying: physical, verbal, and visual. So when we get into physical, visual, and verbal, when we talk about physical, that's the first thing that generally people think of is physical. Oh, somebody's pushing them into lockers or knocking their books out of their hand or something like that. But visual is taken over now with social media, with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. People can bully from other sides of the country and even other sides of the world. And verbal is using your words. Growing up as kids, we would always hear, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And now, as we're older and we have grown in mental health and the impact of words, we realize that that isn't true. Words can impact and hurt for far longer than physical wounds. So, where does bullying happen? Where does bullying happen? Bullying happens anywhere. It happens in schools, it happens in malls, it happens on social media platforms. Bullying can happen anywhere. So do you ever lose the right to speak up? No, you never lose the right to speak up about somebody hurting you or impacting you in a negative way. If somebody is saying things to you, whispering about you, make sure to tell your teacher, talk to your parents. And this bullying often seems like it's geared towards kids because as adults, we're like, well, who would bully us? But when we think about it in the context of sexual violence, you would think, oh, we should be talking to kids. No, because sexual violence happens to everyone the same way bullying happens to everyone. You can be a grown woman and a grown man in an adult job and be bullied by a coworker or your boss. So you have to know that you never lose the right to speak up. So, statistics. Bullying affects 20% of high school students, and cyberbullying affects 16% of high school students. Surveys compiled by the Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention, the CDC, also show that 33% of students ages 12 to 18 who reported bullying at school and 27% of students ages 12 through 18 reported cyberbullying, indicated that they were bullied at least once or twice a month. Middle schools reported the highest rate of bullying at 25%, at least once a week. So especially with COVID and how our school dynamics are starting to change, cyberbullying is something that is so important to talk about because it hurts just the same. And also, when we talk about these numbers of at least once or twice a month, I think that that's great because it explains how bullying happens, because when we see it in movies and TV shows, it's like every day at 4 o'clock, his books get knocked out of his hand. Every day at 3:30, she gets pushed into a locker, but that's not what it looks like all the time. It can look like once or twice a month, somebody saying something rude to you, and it's the same person, and they're just spreading it out because they forget about you or something, like it's not as consistent as we often see in the media, but the impact is the same. So bullying can be direct, so face to face. It can be verbal, so insults, put downs, teasing, harassment. Then it can be psychological, so rolling eyes, dirty looks, uttering threats, extortion. And then physical, shoves, pushes, hitting, assault. These 3 things are so impactful, regardless of if it's shoving, insults, or rolling eyes. The psychological one is one that is so minute that it's hard to call out, and it's hard to feel like you can use your voice to speak up because it'll be little microaggressions of like a group of girls whispering about you And you can't necessarily prove that they're whispering about you, but they're looking at you, they're laughing, these different psychological things that is bullying. I want you to know that each of these three things are bullying, and they are all valid in their own ways. They are all valid. All of those things are bullying, and bullying is not ever acceptable. So, bullying can also be indirect, behind someone's back. It can be exclusion, leaving someone out, shunning them. It can be gossip, lowering people's opinion about the victim. It can be relational aggression, so telling people not to be friends with the victim. Now, when we put it like this, as an adult watching, have you ever experienced bullying in your adult life? I'm sure that you have. I know I have. And so that's why when we talk about bullying, it's so important not only to talk to kids, but to talk to adults. Because how can we tell our kids to stand up for themselves if we don't stand up for ourselves and let the people around us know that what's happening isn't okay and it needs to be stopped? So, the characteristics of victims in the context of younger victims. So, passive. So, passive characteristics would be quiet, anxious, insecure. They tend to normalize and no longer and are no longer victims upon entering adulthood, though they may have continued lower self-esteem and be more prone to depression. Also, proactively, they're reactive, clumsy, impulsive, irritating, attempt to fight back or answer back when attacked, but not effectively. They often are hyperactive and have difficulty concentrating and act in ways that irritate others. So, bullying is violence. Violence doesn't mean is any mean word, look, sign, or act that hurts a person's body, feelings, or things. So, the bullying circle. Bullying. It starts, the bully starts bullying and takes an active part in the bullying. Now we have the follower or the henchman who takes an active part but does not start the bullying. The supporter supports the bullying but does not take an active part. A passive supporter or a possible bully, they like the bullying but does not likes the bullying but does not display open support. So they're not openly saying like, yeah, and like cheering them on, but they like what's going on and they're probably even talking to them behind the scenes, egging them on for things to do. A disengaged onlooker, possible defender, so dislikes the bullying and thinks he ought to help but doesn't. And then defender of the victim, so dislikes the bullying and helps or tries to help the victim. So when we look at this, who here is acknowledging the bullying and who here is enabling the bullying? The enablers are the ones who are egging it on or not doing anything. Because what you permit, you promote. If you are not using your voice and standing up for what's right, then you are saying that the behavior is okay. And so the bully, the henchman, the supporter, the passive supporter, the disengaged onlooker, and the possible defender are all people who could stop the behavior, and they're choosing not to. And so they are enabling that behavior and they are permitting that behavior, meaning they promote that behavior. The only person who is being a rock star in the situation is the defender of the victim. So, enabling is unwittingly protecting a person from the consequences of their actions out of a sense of love, compassion, fear, or survival instinct. Entitlement is the belief that it is our right to use violence or threats of violence to express feelings, meet needs, or satisfy wants. Tolerance. It occurs when violence is accepted as the norm by adults or young people who ignore, rationalize, or minimize incidents of violence. So I think that, let me take another drink of water. It's always hard to get this strong. Okay. I think that tolerance is a big one to talk about, because tolerance is when the violence is accepted. And I think that a lot of times when we're talking about those enablers, if they see the situation, if you ask them and then you ask the victim about the incident, I believe that the enabler would minimize the incident, because since it isn't affecting them, they're like, oh, well, it wasn't that bad. They shouldn't be upset. But then the victim is hurting and having trauma about this for years. And so tolerance is one of the most dangerous ones, because it is enabling and it is entitlement. It kind of bleeds into those, because you are minimizing what's actually occurring. So peer mediation is not effective in situations of bullying. Bullying is not a conflict, but is an abuse. So there's not a question of some right and some wrong on both sides. The playing field or balance of power is not level. It's not level. The bullier has more power than the victim. And so peer mediation is meant for people who are like this, but bullying is like this. So let's get into the effects of bullying. Short-term effects of bullying for the victim: social isolation, feelings of shame, sleep disturbance, changes in eating habits, low self-esteem, school avoidance, symptoms of anxiety, bedwetting, higher risk of illness, psychosomatic symptoms like stomach aches, headaches, muscle aches, other physical complaints with no known medical cause, poor school performance, and symptoms of depression. These are short-term effects, okay? Now let's get into long-term. Long-term effects or long-term risk of bullying for the victim: chronic depression, increased risk of suicidal thoughts, suicide plans, and suicide attempts, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and poor general health, self-destructive behavior, including self-harm, substance abuse, and difficulty establishing trusting, reciprocal friendships and relationships. When you look at these lists, does bullying seem a lot more substantial than these long-term effects, these short-term effects? These things that happen that are just kids, or these are just teenagers and their hormones or whatever, or you're an adult, it's fine, brush it off. These things have lasting effects psychologically, physically, and just on the trajectory of your life. So let's look at the effects of bullying for the bully. Short term is poor school performance. Missed school due to suspensions increases this risk. Also, increased truancy risk, difficulty maintaining social relationships, and increased risk of substance abuse. So substance abuse is something that we've seen for both the bully and the victim. Long-term abuse or long-term effects are risk of spousal or child abuse, risk of antisocial behavior, substance abuse, and less likely to be educated or employed. So let's get into some research. If you ever show up to any of my empowered education sessions, you know that I love research and I love providing studies that go into the topics that I'm talking about. So one longitudinal study led by a group of scientists in Norway investigated the long-term psychological effects of adolescence. Results of the study indicated that all groups involved in bullying during adolescence, both bullies and victims, experienced adverse mental health outcomes in adulthood. While the victims showed a high level of depressive symptoms in adulthood, both groups experienced an increased risk of psychiatric hospitalization due to mental health disorders. Bullying has serious effects on both short and long-term health of children. Immediate intervention and long-term follow-up can help mediate some of these effects. It is imperative that schools, families, and communities work together to understand bullying and its consequences and find ways to decrease and hopefully eradicate bullying both in schools and communities. It ends with you. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead said that. Any questions? Per usual, if there's ever any questions, you can always leave a comment down below on our Facebook page and we will get back to you right away. Or you could call our business or crisis hotline for any questions revolving around sexual violence. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation about bullying and its lasting effects. Be sure to check out our ISM series about the correlation between sexual violence and oppression. If you're curious about how to get involved in counseling, check out our last Empowered Education Thursday, where I sat down with our case manager and legal advocate and talked about the benefits of counseling and what the process looks like to get involved so it seems less scary. And just make sure to turn our post notifications on and give this video a like, a comment, and a share. We hope to see you next Thursday at 10 a.m. Be empowered, be educated. Bye.